And so here we are again this week. A big hello from my heart to yours. It's truly nice to spend this time together in this way. I'd just like to offer a couple of announcements. A big thank you to everyone offering donations and supporting the webcast. And for those of you who don't know, there's two different ways to join. You can listen on Facebook Live, or you can join us for the Zoom broadcast, which is a little bit more intimate, and you can ask a question. And so, again, it's just really nice to be here with you all. Also, there's a wonderful meditation Wednesday nights that I offer as well. And someone wrote in, so I thought I would write or respond a little bit to what they wrote about their experience. Because the Wednesday night meditations have become quite powerful. There's been a very intense transmission that's been arising, and many people have been emailing me saying, like, "Wow, that's a lot of light." And this particular individual wrote, if I could pull it up here. He writes, "Craig, I was having more trouble than normal letting in the light. I felt the overwhelming light all around me, but I felt as though I was having difficulty opening to it fully. The whole meditation, I felt this grip behind my heart, on my spine, and then it was re-gripping each time I relaxed. The mind was neurotically returning to the conversation, which was something about me defending myself as not being bad. And so, we all know this experience of sitting down to meditate. And if you come on a Wednesday night, there could be a lot of light there. And it's interesting because the spiritual path is about you opening to that which is good, that which is divine. So in the way I teach, and I teach in a way where I invite individuals to open to two different things. One, to open to, the quietude, the brilliance of your own presence, to open to awake awareness, which is innocent, vibrant, spacious, and free. And so, this is the first invitation. And then beyond this, I invite you to open to this descent of grace from God. To open to the descent of grace. And, some people, they have trouble opening to their true nature because their mind is busy, or they're have an internal fight that's happening. And, they're struggling with someone or something. Oftentimes that's not even present if we're in meditation. Or we just have a really busy mind or busy emotions. And then some people are experiencing what my friend wrote in and said, I was having trouble opening to the light. My mind was being so neurotic, I was having trouble opening to the light. And, one of the things I thought I'd speak about tonight was forgiveness, the power of forgiveness. The power of forgiveness. The two inquiry questions for tonight or for this week that I invite you to sit with, which are also posted on the Facebook page, are these two questions. What do I know about the healing power of forgiveness? Who or what am I willing to forgive right now? Who or what am I willing to forgive right now? So the biggest reason our mind is busy during meditation or when you're walking down the street, the biggest reason our mind will close itself off from God, the biggest reason why we have not realized our Buddha nature fully right here and right now is because we are carrying around stuff from the past. And almost always, it's things that need to be released and forgiven. Released and forgiven. And I want you to imagine that forgiveness is not you walking up to someone who violently abused you and telling them, I agree with what you did to me. That's not what forgiveness is about. Sometimes people interpret forgiveness as that, is telling, someone who offended you that it's okay that they did that. That's not what forgiveness is. I'd like to paint a much different picture of forgiveness. So today I have a friend who's been staying with me the last little bit, and he needed a job, so I put him to work. I put him to work the same way my teacher put me to work. The first job my teacher gave me was digging holes. And you can really tell what someone's made of when you give them a shovel and see how willing they are to work. But he was a good sport, and he was working today out in the hot sun. We were working a little bit together. And I want you to imagine forgiveness being like at the end of a long, hard day, digging holes, digging post holes in really hard Colorado soil. So when I grew up in Kentucky and in Ohio, you could just sink a shovel into the black dirt and you could just dig and dig and dig, like you're a little kid in the sandbox. In Colorado, you might stick that shovel in the dirt, you might jump on it, and the shovel might not go in the dirt at all. It might go in a half an inch, and you say, oh, wow, I feel like I'm digging in rocks here. And so I want you to imagine that forgiveness is like digging in rocks all day long, just hard back-breaking work. And at the end of the day, forgiveness is like you taking that shovel and just letting it drop out of your hands. Just say, okay, I'm letting go of this shovel. I'm just letting go. I'm not picking this thing up anymore today. Just letting go and experiencing a great wave of relief after carrying around something burdensome. This is what forgiveness is. And so the question for this week in regards to inquiry is, what do I know about the healing power of forgiveness? If we don't know anything about forgiveness, well, then this is a good time to learn. A good time to learn. The next question is, who or what am I willing to forgive right now? Like, what heavy weight am I willing to forgive right now? What am I willing to let go of, to put down, to drop? And so, back to this experience that my friend was sharing with me around the meditation. And he said his mind was returning again and again, to the story in his head of him needing to defend himself. And when we have an idea that we are bad or we're wrong, oftentimes we grip, especially in our heart. Even, I could even say, we grip behind the heart, back toward the spine. Sometimes it can be just this deep inward grip. The spine is where the nervous system is, and the nervous system is where the fight or flight response lives. And so it can just neurotically just be gripping and gripping and gripping. thinking I need to argue, I need to prove myself. And I was speaking with the neighbor. He came over and looked at this mess that we were making in my yard with shovels, and we tore apart an old fence and we're trying to rebuild a new one, but we didn't get very far. The neighbor he came over, and I asked him, his wife's pregnant, so I asked him how it was going, the pregnancy. And he told me, we got in a little tiff yesterday. And I just casually said to him, well, you can either be right or you can be married. Those are your choices. You can be right or you can be married. And when we give ourselves permission to let go of being right, this is a step in the direction of letting go of our defenses, letting go of our argument, and stepping into the realm of forgiveness. Can I forgive my partner for their viewpoint? Here in the United States, we just celebrated Independence Day, and this was probably one of the most divided Independence Days, 4th of July, we've ever had. I know there's been big ones in the past with the Civil War and that, but in recent times, this is definitely the most divided our country has been. And so if we're on the left, can we forgive the right? If we're on the right, can we forgive the left? If we're in the middle, I'm a big fan of being in the middle. Can we forgive both sides, both extremes? Can we forgive and breathe and see each other as fellow human beings? Someone came up to me, and I live in a fairly liberal town, but we also have lots of ranchers. And so Colorado is this wonderful mix of, super liberal, progressive hippies and old school conservative ranchers. And we just seem to find a way to get along. But someone came up and said, we have a lot of Texans in town in Colorado right now, because they're all coming up here to vacation because they don't know what to do, because the whole world's shut down, but Colorado's open. And so someone said, we saw a lot of Make America Great Again hats walking around on Main Street last night. And then there was a little bit of comments after that. And can we smile and just let people wear a red hat if they want to wear a red hat, a blue hat if they want to wear a blue hat, a black hat if they want to wear a black hat? Can we smile? And can we forgive each other for having political beliefs? Can we forgive each other for being bad or wrong? Can we forgive ourselves for being bad or wrong? When we forgive, there's a wave of relaxation that begins to release throughout the body. A wave of relaxation that begins to take over. And there's a funny thing that happens, in meditation. If we're deeply relaxed, if we have forgiven everyone we need to forgive, oftentimes our mind becomes quite silent. Quite silent. If we forgive those who have harmed us or confused us or lashed out at us, then our mind becomes quite quiet. And of course, I always like to remind people that sometimes forgiveness means we first leave the situation, we set boundaries, and then from a distance, we forgive the person from the safety and the peace of our own living room. I'm not inviting you to get in a fist fight with someone and then forgive them in that moment. If they're a dangerous person, if they're someone who's repeatedly causing you pain, you don't need to come back and keep getting slapped. Step away from the situation, set boundaries, and then give yourself permission to cry, to grieve, to let go. And then what you find is, oh yeah, I'm happy to let go. I'm happy to forgive after I've grieved. After I've grieved. And so I encourage you all to take these inquiry questions seriously. It can be something really supportive for your practice and your path. The question of, who or what am I willing to forgive right now, I think is always meaningful, always meaningful. And if we're fortunate enough, if we have, great karma where we don't need to forgive anyone, then that's a sign you're in a really good place. If you feel generally happy and peaceful and relaxed inward, it's a good sign that you're doing something right. One thing I'll add about these questions is, with this second question of who or what am I willing to forgive right now, make sure you include yourself in that. Like this individual was writing that they were feeling like they needed to defend themselves for not being bad. So can you forgive yourself for being less than perfect? Can you forgive yourself for having a human nature? Can you forgive yourself for having anger or sadness or grief or desire? I spent a long time in the beginning of the path being angry at myself because I wanted to be a monk and yet I had desire. And, you have to forgive yourself for being human, Okay, so let me just comment here a little bit on last week's inquiry questions. Was about our relationship with our innocence. It was basically, do I know my innocence? Do I know this quality of awareness? If we have awareness, that's where we experience the quality of peace and freedom, but not innocence, then eventually that peace and freedom will feel dry. But innocence is what gives us life. What gives us life. It's actually a very rejuvenating power on the path when we begin to realize our own innocence. So in response to last week's questions, someone wrote in on the Facebook wall. So I post these questions on the Facebook wall, and you're welcome to leave, some comments of what your experience is. And I encourage you to share. It's another way of connecting with me and with a Sangha. And so I encourage you to share on my Facebook page what your experience has been right under the questions that I write each week. So Kyle writes, Craig, my relationship with the innocence of being is finding my true heart. Beautiful. Our true heart is innocent like a newborn baby because it has no agenda to manipulate the world of people to get what I want. The heart is our subtle guide in life back to God and beingness. Therefore, what I can give up in my egoic agenda of having more money or security or status or acknowledgement from others and even knowledge of the mind. And I can begin to integrate all aspects of myself, whether it's tender innocence or teenage anger. And this is so beautiful, what this last thing he wrote. I can begin to integrate all aspects of myself, whether it's tender innocence or teenage anger. When you begin to open the door to your own innocence, what you find is integration becomes quite natural. Because when you open the doorway to innocence, innocence is a quality like forgiveness. It welcomes, it includes, it has a oneness quality to it. It doesn't reject, it doesn't deny, it doesn't ignore. And so if you want to speed your path, and especially in the realm of integration, innocence is such a profound quality. So is forgiveness. Innocence is such a profound quality because innocence, it has a silent power to it that helps you to hold the space of forgiveness to something like the discovery of teenage anger within your own consciousness, or if you're seeing an outward display of teenage anger. The people who have a lot of trouble with integration are ones who don't forgive and who aren't in touch with this gentle innocence. You know, oftentimes the people who have trouble with integration are the ones who are really serious and who are wanting to be further on down the path than they already are. And so thanks, Kyle, for sharing. That was a great share. Okay, so here's another question. Again, this is from Kyle. Hi, Craig. Can you speak on the advantages of a progressive path toward God versus the direct path? Yeah, Kyle, I'm a fan of both. You know, I've spoken about the Enneagram a lot. I spoke about it last week, I believe. But I've been speaking about it a lot recently. And I'm a 9 on the, I have the 9 qualities, you know, on the Enneagram model. And the gift of, you know, being a 9 is you can see all perspectives. And so, you know, I studied with 2 teachers. My teacher, David, who taught in the lineage, say, of Sri Aurobindo, which was a massively progressive path. And then I also studied with Adyashanti, who was a direct path guy, at least in the beginning. Now he's become more of a progressive path guy as he's gotten older and has matured. But this thing that Adya used to say, you know, many years ago, he doesn't say it so much now, but he used to say it in the beginning when he was teaching, was that if people can just wake up to what they are, so if you can step out of your mind, out of your emotional nature, out of egoic identification. So just think of just stepping out of mind. We can all play with that right now, just stepping back out of mind. You become quite silent. If you unhook from your emotional story, the fight or flight response, right away you step into a place of peace and freedom. And one of the things that Adya used to teach a lot was if you could just step into this place, it solves so many of your problems. It solves so many of your problems immediately. It helps just to wake you up out of that dream, that delusion. And so that's step 1. And if people could get step 1, that's a huge step forward. So that's the direct path. Step into your true nature. Step out of your false nature into your true nature, which is awake, aware, tender, innocent freedom. And then when you look at your life, oftentimes you don't take it so seriously. The burdens don't seem like, oh, I need to hold on to these so tightly and so tensely. There's great freedom that can be experienced immediately. And then what Adya used to say was, from this place, now deal with your life. Now deal with your life. So it's best to deal with your life from a place of freedom than from a place of delusion. And so if you go to a psychologist, you know, I'm trained in psychology, but I don't work like most psychologists. So most psychologists are in their head with their training and their skills, and then they work with you. So it's their ego, their superego, working with your superego. So 2 superegos working with each other. And of course, psychology, going seeing a psychologist is very helpful. But there's a limit to it because, you know, you never really step into true nature. And so the way I teach and the way I work is we at least attempt to put down the mind, put down the emotional nature, step into true nature. So I start with an assumption when you come to see me. I start with the assumption that you are not broken. That's the assumption of the psychologist. But my assumption is you're divine, you're holy. You are awake and aware. You're a child of God, which means you are innately good. Innately good. So I start with this assumption. And then I support you in the greater realization of this. And as we begin to step into this truth of the direct path, you stepping into your true heart, your true goodness, true awareness, then we look at the things that continue to trouble you, the things that are deeply hooked, deeply embedded, the things that you trip over again and again and again and again. And I'll say this, it'll come off as a little harsh and judgmental, but I'm just going to say it anyways. I know, I'll use this word, way too many individuals who've tried the direct path, who've experienced a profound awakening, and who are still, I'll be blunt here, a jerk, a snob, ridiculously arrogant, prideful, harsh, critical, selfish, abusive. Can you believe that one? I found this in some of the great modern day non-dual teachers who are my colleagues. And I found this in many of their students, and I found it in many of the individuals who've come to me. They've had profound awakening, but then they can't be nice to their wife or their kids or themselves. How about that? They can't even be nice to themselves. I can't tell you how many great non-dual teachers I've had. You know, I sit down and they gossip about other teachers, about themselves, about, you know, they attack you or put you down or play the hierarchy game of one-upmanship. And it's terrible. Gosh, aren't we all just human here? And please, I hope this isn't coming off as judgmental. I'm just reporting what I've seen with, you know, seemingly great teachers and their students and many individuals who I've met with. And let me be clear here. I saw this in my own self. I saw this in my own self. So I want to be clear. So I want to be the pot calling itself black, you know. I saw this in my own self. And I started to have profound awakenings. And then I realized, oh my gosh, what did I just say? That was really mean what I just said. That was really rude. That was really angry. That was really judgmental. What I just said. Why is that? Oh, it's simply because there's something still hooked into me. An old habit. An old habit. Maybe it's because my, you know, even though I, you know, had a profound awakening, maybe my ego, my egoic nature, what's still here, became overstimulated by life, became overly busy. I took on too much. And so what the progressive path does is the progressive path starts with a very humble teaching, which says, we're all human. We're all eternally growing. We're all eternally growing. And the progressive path, when you just hold this basic idea of we are all works in progress, when we acknowledge science, a basic science which says this is an evolutionary world, this is an evolutionary body, this is an evolutionary mind, this is an evolutionary emotional nature. And by evolutionary, I mean it's growing. It's growing. It's growing. The human mind today, the collective human mind today, is greatly different than the collective human mind in 1492 or 1776 or the year 400 or the year whatever, 2000 BC. It's greatly different mind. Greatly different mind. People didn't even have the word for sexism at the time of the Buddha. It wasn't even a concept. And so our mind has grown, our emotional nature has grown. The way we treat each other is growing, in theory. It doesn't seem that way if you look at the news. But our world is so much more progressive than it was, say, many hundred years ago. I'm watching this silly show on, I think it's on Hulu. I'm not sure. It's called The Great, and I think it's about Catherine the Great, and she married this Russian guy, Russian czar, I guess is what he was. And it just shows just what a crazy time it was whenever that took place. Let's say it was 1400, who knows? But just such a crazy time. The way they were so violent with each other, their norms, and it's a little bit of a comedy, so it's not totally politically and culturally accurate, but it just shows what life was like back in those times when a king could look at someone and immediately turn them into a slave or a servant. And so it's important to admit, this basic truth that the progressive path is life. We don't even have to call the progressive path a spiritual path. It's life. Life is progressive. If you ever hang out with anyone who's 86 years old, they have great wisdom. Great wisdom. So much more wisdom than a teenager. And even like I was speaking about my teacher, Adya. In the beginning, when he was teaching, he taught in a very direct pathway. Over the years, and I've spoken to him about this personally, he said, yeah, I've moved more towards a progressive path. He actually told me that he found it unhelpful to awaken some people too quickly. He said it can be quite destructive to their life. And most people are not ready to be awake. And by that, they haven't done the psychological developmental work to hold the presence of awakening that they are. And so Ajay, he spent, I believe it was 14 years with his teacher. I think his first awakening was at, him and me have really similar stories, but he met his teacher, I think, when he was 19, and he had his first awakening at 25. But he stayed for 14 years. So he had the head, heart, gut awakening, 3 different awakenings. And even after the third, he stayed on with his teacher for a number of months. And so here's a direct path teacher who followed a progressive path and a direct path. Me, I'm very much the same way. If we don't honor the progressive path, we oftentimes end up in great danger. The danger of arrogance, the danger of pride, the danger of judgment, is oftentimes people have an awakening and they come to me and they say, I'm awake. Why do I still have anger? Because you have a human body. That's why you have anger. You have a human ego. You have a psychological nature that needs to develop. And you can't outrun evolution. You have to walk through the steps, and you can't skip the steps of evolution. You can't. Skipping the steps of evolution is very much like what I tried to do with my daughter this year around buying her bikes. And forgive me if you've heard this story, but my daughter was on a 16-inch wheel bike. It was her first year, like really learning how to ride a bike. And I wanted to take her mountain biking. And so I took her to the store and I realized I could buy her a 20-inch bike that she'll just ride for like a year or two, or I could, bump her up to a 24 right now. So I threw her on a 24-inch bike. So she's on a 16 now. I skipped the 20. I went to the 24, and she was able to pedal around the parking lot. And I said, oh yeah, let's do it. I'm getting you the big bike, the big girl bike, And I brought it home, and she couldn't squeeze the brake levers because her hands were too small. And I just realized this bike is too big for her. And so a couple of weeks later, I humbly went back to the store with my head down saying, okay, give me the 20-inch one. Now I have 3 bikes for my little girl. And so I went back and bought the 20-inch one. And so you can't skip steps. You can't. You can't. And it's just common on the direct path that people think, I'm awake, there's no one here, there's nothing to do, there's no problem. And there may be no one here, nothing to do, and no problem in an absolute sense, which I fully encourage everyone to realize, because there's great freedom in that, in the absolute sense. But then, in a personal sense, when you open your mouth, as soon as you're in relationship, you'll realize your developmental nature is speaking. So, I can do this funny thing of going into a state of samadhi. I have to be careful not to talk about it because I might just slip into it. I can't speak about that because I lose my train of thought. So I can do this funny thing of just stepping into samadhi. But then when I come out of samadhi and I need to take care of a 6-year-old who's having a temper tantrum, how am I responding? Am I responding from a place of absolute peace and Buddha nature? Or am I responding from my human nature? My human nature. The beautiful thing is when you're connected to peace, it floods into your human nature, but it does not immediately transform it and heal it and upgrade it 100% completely and fully in an instant. Change takes time. And so, Kyle, beautiful question. We need to honor both. We need to honor both. Both have shadows. The shadow of the progressive path is, a lot of times if we're solely on a progressive path, we actually forget that we're God, or we don't even know that we're God. The direct path helps you to wake up. Oh yeah, I'm divine. I'm a Buddha. Christ consciousness is my nature. Is my nature. And so a lot of progressive path people, they're always thinking that God is outside of them, is somewhere in the future. The shadow of the direct path is, I am God and I know everything. And I hate to say it, I've fallen prey to that. So please, if you heard me speaking poorly about any of my colleagues, please hear this. I lump myself in with them, that I've made all these same mistakes. There's not a mistake that I have not made on planet Earth. So my mistakes are a mile high, Okay, so I have a bunch more questions, but our good friend Richard is here and has a question. So let me see. Richard, you still have a question? Okay, I think I unmuted you.
Yeah, you did. Hey there.
Hi, Richard. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. And everyone else, of course. And hello to all my Facebook friends as well. So, Craig, today, you talked a lot about an embodiment and integration already. I'd like to hear about that more, but I'd love to hear about it a little less from any theoretical standpoint and more from like your direct experience and journey with that. Again, I know that you just did a lot of direct, progressive, and even then you were talking about it with forgiveness. But I'd love to hear more. And again, I'd really love to hear it rooted from your personal experience.
Yeah. So Richard, how about with any kind of specific example? Like, do you want me to focus on a certain thing that I worked with integration?
So yeah, I apologize. Because I actually do have maybe a more theoretical basis for the question, but I just want to hear more about it, kind of your experience where you are in the path. But it's just like you said, there are lots of real awake people who aren't integrated in many aspects of their psychological or human or even just physical nature. Yeah. And wow, what an interesting thing. Most of us don't arrive on the path thinking that that's the case. that's counterintuitive. The story that we still get is like you wake up and you grow up. Like
Yeah.
they come together, and we've just
Yeah.
found time and time again that that's not the case, whether they're Indian gurus coming to the West or Western gurus who are
Yeah.
already here. Let me just say one more thing before you go in. It is amazing how the ego, which is an evolutionary mechanism, totally fine, co-ops awakening
Yeah.
very quickly to spiritually bypass or even get developmental needs met, maybe sleeping with students or different things like
Yeah.
that, right? But in a really destructive way.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's beautiful. I was actually speaking with my wife today, about this, and oftentimes she complains about how difficult it is to live with someone like me, and so because one of the things that I do is I can get just really spacious and empty, and then she'll speak to me and I can't remember what she said 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago. And so one of the things that I'm really working on with my own integration is doing more yoga, getting my feet more deeply on the earth. And I'm always working with pulling myself down and getting myself rooted here on the earth. And this is something I've literally struggled with since I was a child. I was just getting Craig, like get him back down on the earth. And it's one of the reasons why I love to work. I don't know if I love to work, why I choose to do physical labor. A lot of my teacher friends, colleagues, have looked at me and they said, Craig, why are you still working a chainsaw? Why don't you hire someone to do that? Why are you working a shovel in your yard? Why do you work on your cars? Like, take them to a mechanic. And when I do physical labor, it grounds me. So it's just one of the ways it helps me get really grounded, kind of salt of the earth kind of thing, because I can just float. And I could just float and float and float and float. And I've spent years and years of my life floating. And what I realized is doing things that I actually don't really like to do. Like, I don't really like to work a shovel. I don't like to, go out in the freezing cold and, uh, try to fix something on my Jeep and bust my knuckles in the freezing cold. But it's good for me because it helps ground me. It helps root me back on the earth. And Richard, we've spoke, a little bit before about eating. And so a lot of people just eat as a way to kind of like, they're feeling spacious, so they eat to get grounded. And I find myself doing it sometimes at night is, to be really spacious. And I'm like, I just need a little bit of that chocolate and a little bit of the, the crackers or whatever it is to help, get me rooted again. And so, the big thing for me is getting grounded. And then the other thing too is it's just anything in regards to relationship. So the beautiful thing about relationship is, one, relationship is a mirror. Two, relationship is, oftentimes the intelligence of the universe uses relationship to point out all the shadows, the wounds, the shortcomings, little tendencies where you're short with people, where you're prideful. Like my wife tells me all the time, she's like, you talk too loud wherever you go. And I say, oh, okay, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out, because she'll say, you always walk in the room thinking you're the boss. And she's like, you're not, you're not the boss. And so, and, when you start to wake up, you begin to, if you wake up in your belly, you start to get comfortable taking up more space and being a bigger and bigger human being. And of course, the shadow side of that is it leads into arrogance and or pride, or just thinking, you're Guruji and you know everything. But, the beautiful thing is I have a wife who, can point things out to me. I have a teenage daughter who can point things out to me. I have a 6-year-old girl. I have all these girls. They're just always pointing stuff out to their dad. And it helps me. It helps me to grow. It helps me to look at something and say, oh, yes, look how my ego was responding to life. Look how, my white privilege was showing up. Oh my gosh, like, look how that was showing up, in such an arrogant way. And it's beautiful, to have someone point that out and then to be humbled and to look at it and then to question, like, is that really what I was doing? And then stepping back in and saying, oh yeah, that's what I was doing. I was being really arrogant. I was, being really presumptuous, if that's the word, where you assume, that uh, and so these are things that I work with, all the time. In fact, to me, I want you to imagine that there's, say, let's say 3 great awakenings in Kundalini awakening, and they're really all one once they all kind of integrate together. But there's this 4th awakening that I call awakening to your evolutionary nature, where you let go of any resistance to evolution. It's almost where you look at life and you say, I am fully willing to jump into the evolutionary stream of life and to be a human. It's very similar to Jesus on the cross, and I don't want that to sound too dramatic, but what Jesus on the cross basically is representing is, I give myself fully to this human world, and I'm willing to grow and be an evolutionary being in this world. Because any of us, when we live in this world, it's like being on a cross. We get beat up so many different ways. We have so much tragedy, heartache, pain, confusion, and a willingness to be a human being, a divine being who knows they're divine, who's also willing to be divine and to choose to be human. It's this choice of putting your feet on planet Earth and saying, yes, I'm willing to be the evolving edge of God. And that sounds poetic, but what it means to be the evolving edge of God is, I'm going to go have a very difficult conversation with someone who hates me and let them tell me how much they hate me. And I'm going to listen and I'm going to learn and I'm going to see if I can forgive them and beg for their forgiveness. I'm going to try to be a father of a teenage daughter and I'm going to fail again and again and again. And I accept that I will fail, and I accept that I will never stop trying to be better. But in this level of awakening, this 4th level awakening, the trying and the doing actually feels as if it's flowing through you as God, not like me, my human ego is trying to be a really good dad. Like I'm going to read all these parenting books on being a really good dad. No, it feels like God is trying to be a really good dad through me. And then when God fails, it feels like, oh, this is God failing at being a good father. And it hurts and it aches in a human way. And at the same time, it's this paradox of it feeling like it's completely and totally okay to be utterly humiliated and experience tragedy and pain, and yet it hurts so much and I'm crying and it's okay. And this 4th level of awakening is really where what Kyle's writing is the progressive path and the direct path become one. And we choose to incarnate, which is very different than saying, like what the Buddha basically was saying, like, okay, like I don't really want to incarnate anymore. I want to get off the wheel and I want to go to the land of nirvana where I don't incarnate again. This is a different type of choice. Just say, oh, I'm choosing to be here 100% consciously. And again, this isn't some human, righteous, saintly kind of silly thing like that. It's God choosing to incarnate in the form of you and to go through this, I'm going to use this word, hellish life experience. And because we realize, like, it is true what the Buddha said, life is suffering. It's painful, it's difficult, it's messy. But can you give yourself permission to fall on your knees, to make a mistake, to make a fool of yourself, to try and fail, and to try and fail, to try and fail, and then try again, and then maybe get it 20% better. And there's this great freedom that happens as the resistance falls away and you give yourself permission just to be human. There's such a tenderness about it and a love and also a heartache, because being a human is really hard. It's really hard. And so I hope I'm explaining it well. And I hope that was, answered the question to some degree, Richard. Yeah, yeah. I will say this because Richard brought up something really beautiful is Richard brought up this tendency that many people have on the direct path to spiritually bypass. When you fully give into the progressive path, you don't try to use spirituality to avoid life. When you fully give into the progressive path, you say, my spirituality is my life experience. Like, God is showing up as my teacher right here, right now, in the form of my girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, dog, the pit bull that just bit me, the car accident I got in. There's this quiet understanding that that life is evolution, evolution is God. But on the direct path, oftentimes we follow mercy to spiritually bypassing. We step into the absolute and act like our human self doesn't exist. And to me, when I do that, it actually feels like I'm stepping into a hell realm. Because when you choose to spiritually bypass, you're actually creating a wall and a division between you and life. And so you're missing out on a whole other realm of freedom. And I don't know if many people speak about that. Because a lot of people think of spiritual bypassing as like, I'm just going to escape into the absolute. But if there's anything within your consciousness that is trying to escape somewhere, that is directly pointing out there's a place within you that is not free, that is still afraid, and you're putting up a wall. And to me, anytime I consciously or unconsciously put up a wall, it feels like hell. And so I say, oh yeah, I don't want to do that. It feels like hell if I try to put up a wall. And just where I'm at in life, it doesn't work anymore to bypass. Because you just see life will just come and will slap me in the face quickly. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, can't bypass that. It's right there. And I think I spoke about this last week, but there's these silly myths that we've all been sold that once you awaken to your true nature, you stop experiencing any pain or suffering. And I'll say the complete opposite. You experience more pain and more suffering. More pain and more suffering. More pain because you feel more, and more suffering because you feel more. Now, I used to teach that there was this distinction between you don't experience self-created suffering. So that's true. So there's less self-created suffering, like egoic confusion and voices in your head arguing with each other. But you do experience more suffering because the more you experience oneness and unity with all life, you may not individually be suffering or having pain, but you're going to feel the pain of this world if your heart is open. You're going to feel the pain of your brothers and sisters and fellow light beings on the path. You're going to feel their pain, and you're going to feel it immensely. And I'll say this, there's days I wake up and I feel like I'm being crushed in pain. I said, what is all this pain? And then oftentimes it's the next person I speak with, they're having a panic attack. I'm like, oh, okay, this is their pain. And I was feeling it. And um, you just open up to feel so much more. But because there's, this strength within you, the pain doesn't, knock you over as much. You feel it more. It just doesn't, I'd like to say it hurts less, but there's a strength here that's big enough to embrace it. And more, we find that the whole path of integration is a path of a willingness to feel. That's what most spiritual people don't want to do. They don't want to feel anything except for bliss and freedom. So if we want to integrate, we have to be willing to feel, and we have to be willing to embrace. And as we do so, what happens is oftentimes the pain is released, and there's a gift that is liberated, that's brought to the surface. Like when you face despair, crushing despair, depression, anxiety, when you feel it and then you embrace it wholeheartedly, the qualities that come forward are unconditional love, unconditional strength. If you don't embrace those two things, you may experience peace, but it's not unconditional. And so there's a great gift in suffering. Great gift. So anyways, beautiful question. Okay, here's a question from Andrew. Hi, Craig. I'm wondering about your thoughts about vegetarianism versus eating meat in a spiritual sense. Yeah, so my thoughts. This is a funny thing because I've been asked to speak on vegetarianism. I've actually spoke at vegan conferences in the past. And it's a funny thing is I don't have much thoughts about it. What I do have is there's just something that awoke in my heart that chose not to eat animals. And it arose, when I was 14 years old. And it was just like that. It was just boom. Someone said the word vegetarian, something woke up in my heart. It just, I just haven't eaten any meat since. I mean, my children, my daughter, she's 19 now. She's never eaten any meat. My 6-year-old, her either. And to me, it's just, I look at a cow the same way I'd look at a rock as far as eating it. Like, I'm not going to eat a rock. I'm not going to eat a cow. If you want to know my thoughts on it, this is just what my heart tells me to do. And it's just what I do. I can say this, if I'm going to have some thoughts. I know that people have different body types. Some people's bodies really work with a vegetarian diet. And it appears I have one of those bodies. I know the Dalai Lama has tried numerous times to be a vegetarian. And every time he does, he gets greatly sick and ill. And so at some point, he just decided, like, I have to eat meat because he was getting deathly ill. If I had some thoughts, it's great for the planet. It's great for the ecosystem. It's humane. It's kind. It's compassionate. If we don't have to kill, then let's not kill to eat if we don't have to. Please don't interpret that as I'm saying something judgmental or I think you're bad and wrong if you eat meat. From an evolutionary perspective, we live in a world where human beings have evolved eating meat, and it's a part of their diet, like the same way cars are part of our lifestyle. I would love it if we lived in a world where there was no killing. I would also love it if we lived in a world where there was no gender, where we just grew out of the ground like trees. And, we just blossomed into these beautiful redwood trees. But, we don't live in that world. And so, in a spiritual sense, I know, most of the great Indian saints and sages have been vegetarian. I mean, I think there's something really kind and sweet about it. But I also know that some people, when they don't eat meat, they get really sick or they have zero energy. And so if we're going to eat meat, I would encourage people to eat uh, from animals that are humanely raised. Um, and if anyone looks at any kind of video on factory farming, or where most of our meat comes from, the destruction, like most of the destruction that happens in the Amazon rainforests, so people can have hamburgers, you know, because it's becoming the new diet in Latin America. You know, so it's terrible for our environment. It's terrible for the animals living in those factory farms. And so if you do choose, can you have a connection with the animal, with the farmer? Uh, can you support farms? And that means paying more money for your food from a small farm instead of some big factory farm. You know, this in February when I was driving to teach a retreat in San Diego, I drove by, it was like 3 massive factory farms right along the southern border of Arizona and Mexico. And it just looked, there was just such hell. The vibration was just utter hell coming from that place, the stench, you know, from the waste fields and the way they're all crammed in there. And it just felt like they were all just screaming in pain. And so, you know, the greatest vote that we have doesn't come once every 4 years. The greatest vote we have is how we vote every day with our dollar, and what we support with our money. And so, listen to me, I'm such a hypocrite. I said I didn't have any thoughts on it, and here I did. Tons of thoughts, but those are my thoughts. But the big thing, if you're choosing to be a vegetarian, if you choose to eat anything, whatever diet it is, ask your heart. Ask your heart. Ask your heart. What do I truly want? Ask your body, not your emotional body, because the emotional body oftentimes wants junk food, you know. But ask your true heart. Ask your true body, your physical body, like, what do you want? What do you want? Me, I could just eat lettuce all day long. Like I'm like a rabbit. You know, I could just eat lettuce. And so, but I don't necessarily think that that's what all of your hearts are saying. You listen to your heart. But my heart says, you know, give you a big bowl of lettuce and some chopped up apples and some walnuts or something. And, you know, out in my garden, I've got just tons and tons of lettuce. And so I'm happy to grow it and have a connection with the food, have a connection with the earth, have a connection with the consciousness of the plants themselves and feel the aliveness, the vibrancy of them. I love gardening. It's such magic and such divinity that you see just growing up out of the earth. And then you begin to see that all beings are awake. And the cows that are across the street from my house, like I love the cows. And my daughter always screams at me. We have these big windows and looks out to a big blue sky and these cows below. And my daughter screams, "Dad, the cows are coming. The cows are coming. Oh, look, there's a baby one, you know." And we go out and we say hi to the cows, you know. But that's what's in our hearts, you know. Some people look at a cow and they say, "I want a big hamburger," but that may be true for your body. And so I'm going to invite you to look at your heart and see what's true for you. Okay, here's a question from my good friend Adrian in New York City. Craig, can you speak on dealing with really negative, toxic people in the workplace? I had to quit my job on Friday as I couldn't deal with certain individuals anymore. I'm super sensitive after my awakening, but have come a long way with it. It was the right thing for me to do, as I tried many things to make peace with that environment. Luckily, a new door has opened and I will be starting a new job tomorrow. So Adrian, I want you to look at what you just said. Basically, how do I deal with toxic people? So sometimes we think we need to learn how to deal with a toxic person who's come into our life. But sometimes if we don't leave a situation, God will send a toxic person in there to get out their crowbar and to push us out of this situation. I recently had a very toxic person come into my life and to use a crowbar and push me out of a situation. And it was great because it was a situation where I was staying too long, I was giving too much, and the toxic person was actually helpful. They were really an angel in disguise. And, you know, my habitual nature would have been, I just would have stayed longer and longer, helping and giving more and overextending myself. But then the toxic person came and they made it so difficult for me to stay because I, like you, am sensitive. I said, okay, it's time for me to go. And I wasn't going because of fear. I wasn't going because, you know, I was intimidated by them. It was just, oh yeah, God was just using them to kind of send me in the opposite, in a different direction, a new direction. And see, this toxic person, they helped push you out the door into your new job. And this is beautiful. This is beautiful. So sometimes toxic people are angels in disguise. Sometimes they teach you how to be strong. Sometimes they teach you how to forgive, or they give you the opportunity to forgive. Sometimes they invite you to look at, what do you actually care about? What do you care about? What do you want out of life? Sometimes they teach you that life's too short. Life's too short to argue with someone who just wants to argue in circles. And so I'm going to invite you, Adrian, to see this person as a gift from God. A gift from God. And so it's all individual, you know, with a toxic person. The big thing is whenever we have a toxic person in our life, what we normally do is we get in our head and we get in our belly and we start arguing with them. Even not even out loud, but just like spinning circles in our head. One of the great things we can do is if you just step back out of the situation, step back out of you as a human person, and just ask, like, what is God trying to teach these two people here? And of course, focus on the one person being you. But what is God trying to teach these two people? You know, I've seen throughout my life, there's been times when I was literally just supposed to be a punching bag for someone else. And I've been that many times when I had a friend, a colleague, a child, whatever, and they had too much angst in them. And they needed me just to do this, you know, just to be a punching bag. And it hurt and it was toxic. But they needed someone to stand in the light and, you know, and unload their punches on me. Unload their punches on me. And that was healing for them. Sometimes it has nothing to do with us, everything about them. Sometimes it's all about us. And God is using them. And so it's different every time. And so after you step away and create space and boundaries, look at forgiveness again. And just forgiveness in the sense of, I'm letting go of the toxic person and I'm moving on. And I don't need to worry about them anymore. The big mistake people make is when we have a toxic person in our life, if they really hurt us, we go forward in the future thinking everyone is like that. This happens especially in relationships. You know, if I meet a beautiful lady, we fall in love, and then she's really mean and violent to me, it's a common thing for people, you know, to walk away, have a broken heart, and then think like all women are like this, or all men are like this, or all people are like this. And that's a mistake the ego makes. It makes generalized trauma mistakes. It takes an individual trauma and generalizes it and projects it onto the world. And that's a big mistake because that closes you off from life. Okay, beautiful. Okay, this is from Colleen. Hi, Craig. How am I not being the doer, the false self, when trying to feel, think of these qualities of innocence, forgiveness? It seems to be a feeling that comes from thought. I feel peace and I just wonder how much I'm trying to do it. Thank you. Yeah, please. The inquiry exercises I'm inviting are not, I'm not wanting you to effort or to do, but rather to discover something that's already here within you that perhaps you don't have awareness of, that perhaps you don't have awareness of. I feel peace. I just wonder how much I'm trying to do. Innocence. Thank you. So, so if you feel peace, peace tends to be spacious. It tends to be gentle. And so if we're in a place of gentleness, just feel into that gentleness a little bit more. Just invite the awareness to turn on the quality of gentleness that's in peace. And what you'll discover is this innocence will come forward and you'll feel it in your heart. So oftentimes people feel peace up here, like kind of in this chakra area, and then maybe a numbness throughout the body, or just like a dry peace throughout the body. So innocence is inviting a quality of love in the heart. It comes with a flavor of tenderness, sweetness. And again, it's a divine quality that is already here in you, Colleen. I'm not asking you to do, like to be the doer and to do innocence, but to discover it here. The same way you discovered peace, can you discover love? Can you discover strength? And I want you to imagine that as big as peace is, as big as silence is, that there's a love that big too. There's a strength that's big too. There's an innocence that is that big also. That big also. And that big being infinite. Being infinite. So yeah, don't do any of my teachings. Just 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 give yourself permission to open to them the same way you open to peace. Hi, Craig. Staying up very late to watch this week from the UK. All right. Welcome. Okay, here's a question here. For me, Craig, the Enneagram is just not so. Let's see here. Let's see what this is a really long one. Okay, this one I probably won't be able to get to. Someone just wrote me like 8 paragraphs. And so I apologize. I won't be able to get this whole question because that's really long. That's from Julian. So if anyone ever has questions for me, send me something short. I actually have trouble reading. It's one of the things that happened after my awakening is it kind of did a number with my brain. I have trouble reading long paragraphs. So forgive me for my my shortcomings here. Here's one from John. Hi, Craig. I'm wondering about energetic blockages in the body that seem to have a physical rather than emotional psychological cause. I have a hernia that is untreated due to the fact that it wasn't producing any symptoms until my Kundalini awoke. I'm hesitant to have surgery because there's a significant block in that area, but I'm hesitant to have surgery since I want to be kind to my body as possible. Can you speak of this? Yeah, John, I've had all kinds of blockages throughout my body that have been mentally based, emotionally based, and physically based. And with anything that's a physical pain, the big thing that I hold is this perspective that the body can heal itself, that the body is a miraculous manifestation of divinity, And in order to help my body to heal, or at least to come into greater alignment, I need to learn how to soothe it, to provide a soothing, healing place or space for my body. And so if I do have chronic physical pain, and when it comes forward, I just imagine I just hold my heart and I hold my belly and I breathe in this basic mantra of I love you and it's okay. I love you and it's okay. What I have found more often than not is any blockage that was associated with wherever the pain was, the blockage begins to open and release, and then the Kundalini can flow through it. So even if it's a physical thing. And so I encourage you to work with this. It's funny that the body heals and opens the same way, whether it's physical pain, emotional pain, or mental pain. Our body first needs to know that it's safe, and second, that it's loved. It's safe and loved. People with trauma, people with pain, they don't heal if they don't feel safe first. And you're not going to heal if we don't feel love, if we're not connected to love. And so anytime the body's in pain, again, whatever pain is, even a broken neck, when we have a trauma there, physical trauma, the fight or flight response reacts and it tends to hold itself tight around the pain. But if you hold the pain and breathe into the pain, this basic mantra of I love you and it's okay, again and again and again, it calms the nervous system, which helps the chakras open, helps the blockage to release. And so I encourage you to play with this, John. Okay. So a couple of other questions here. I'll try to be quick because I know it's getting a little bit late. This is from Ananda. Hi, Craig. Will spiritual awakening clear me of attached spiritual entities and heal a weak and leaky aura? I'm in a Kundalini process and I'm doing your tantric warrior approach. I love this. I'm doing your tantric warrior approach to feelings, sitting with them when they show up, but how to work with beliefs. Would be most grateful to hear your thoughts on this. Will spiritual awakening clear me of attached spiritual entities and heal a weak, leaky aura? Yes, so people who struggle with entities, oftentimes it's because there is a hole, literally a hole, in our psyche. And whenever there's a hole in our psyche, energy leaks out and energy leaks in. And it may show up in the form of, say, an entity, may show up in the form of neurotic thoughts, may show up in the form of, OCD or anger issues or, whatever it is, an eating disorder. Like for me, I had a leaky aura. I love this. It sounds like a leaky gut. So when I was going through my divorce, I had all these feelings of unworthiness and feelings of guilt and shame. Like, keep in mind, these were all my feelings, but in my head, I wasn't addressing the guilt and the shame and the unworthiness. I was in my head arguing with my former wife. And when I was in my head arguing with her and ignoring the pain in my body, what happened is right around my second chakra area, first and second chakra area, I literally would walk around, like I could literally walk around this little mountain town I'm in, and it felt as if I was bleeding out of my back, out of my lower back. And I literally was bleeding energy. And so the way I healed this was through being a tantric warrior, like you're writing, is through facing the guilt. And guilt is a heavy secondary emotion that helps you to not feel what's under it. And so I looked at the guilt first. I sat with that for, I could say, many years, not knowing what to do with it, going back up into my head. But then I realized, oh, the guilt is covering something. What's under the guilt? Oh, there's tremendous sadness within me. As I begin to feel the sadness and meet it with love, I became empowered. And then guess what? I didn't have a hole in my aura anymore. I didn't have a hole in my energy field. It's no longer leaking energy. I wasn't walking around feeling like I was being sucked dry by entities or whatever the forces were. I felt strong like this as soon as I grieved. As soon as I grieved. So will spiritual awakening clear me of attached entities? No. A spiritual awakening like that doesn't clear you of entities. What clears you of entities is when you connect with your power, your strength, do your healing psychological work. That's a part of the awakening process. But if we're just talking about waking up like that, like in a direct way, like I was speaking about in the beginning, you can be quite awake and also be just bleeding energy all over the place. You can be awake to peace, but not awake to power. It's a very common thing. A lot of people wake up to peace, but not to power. When you wake up to power and unconditional love, then we're not leaking, we don't have holes in us. And then it's, then we're not being sucked dry by entities and this type of thing. Great question, Ananda. I'm getting more and more questions about entities, and it just seems like a lot of people are struggling with these. Anyways, thank you, Frida. Okay, here's a question. Hi, Craig. I've been through a very profound and difficult Kundalini transformation process since 2005. I experienced the death to my false self. I've experienced directly all of what you describe in your videos. Started in 2010 for my wife also. I've never heard of a couple going through that together. It's actually, it's a little bit common, and so just keep that in mind. She had to get her own apartment because we could not be together physically anymore. Now, 3 hours a day is the maximum together we can spend. And after that, it's too much light and pain and irritation. Physical pains have been paramount. Being kind to the pain, observing it, detaching from it, surrendering, crying, letting go. Tons of aids, I'm not sure what that means, have not allowed me to live a single day without pain. Any advice? Yeah, this is a fun question. I can say that when my Kundalini first woke up, my wife, her Kundalini started waking up. She actually had to stop coming to my satsangs because she was getting physically sick from being in my presence. Because there was so much burning light and energy. It wasn't because she hated me, but it's because there's so much light, and it was bringing up so much light and just nausea within her. And there was a couple times when she literally just got up and walked away. And afterwards I said, "Sweetie, what's going on? Are you okay?" And she's like, "What is going on with all that energy?" And yeah, and there was many years. I mean, still to this day, I have to sleep in a way so my spine isn't facing her spine. It's just, I don't want to get too strange or too weird about this, but when Kundalini wakes up, it can be a lot of light. And when couples are deeply, open-heartedly connected without walls, and they're empathetic beings, to say, if I'm in relationship with you and my Kundalini wakes up and you're a very sensitive and open-hearted person and empathetic, there's a good chance your Kundalini will at least activate. Whether that's for 30 seconds or for 10 years, that depends on the other person's karma. But it's common to at least have a small activation of it in relationship. A lot of people have their Kundalini wake up through a physical union with each other. You know, so it's actually a common thing among couples. But normally, because, you know, we're all individuals, it only, you know, it might just really wake up in one, but only just activate for a temporary period of time in the other. And so, you know, the big thing, Gerard, that the two of you need to work on is opening to your strength. Opening to your strength and not giving in to sensitivity. And let me speak about this. And I speak about this almost every week. On the path of spiritual awakening, we tend to become more and more sensitive. Now, if we are becoming more and more sensitive, but not more and more strong, the sensitivity tends to overwhelm us. And then we say things like, I can't be in the room with them. They drive me crazy. There's too much energy. There's too much light. When you develop your inner strength, you can be around anything. So when my Kundalini first woke up, no one could touch me. It was like a silly thing. If people touched me, I started having seizures and convulsions. Sometimes people wouldn't believe me, and they'd come and they'd stick their hand above my head, which I shouldn't do that. But it'd cut off. It would put a line between the energy that was rising and the space of divinity of God, and I'd start to convulse and do all these strange things. It's a little bit traumatic for my little girl at the time. She's a big girl now, but at the time, she used to harass me. She said, "Dad, I can't touch you because you're bouncing all over the place." Things can get weird, but I always focused on strength on the path, because I didn't want to be a spiritual person who wasn't strong, because then we just become overwhelmed by our own sensitivity. And so for the two of you, Gerard, it's going to be all about strength of sensitivity. Most people are sensitive, and when they're sensitive, they feel overwhelmed. Their ego screaming at them saying this is too much, and so then they have to leave. But what I'd like you to realize is this is not too much for the presence that I am. The presence that I am is as big as the sky. The presence that I am is as deep as the earth. The presence that I am is strong, is powerful, is profound. This presence that I am lives through birth and death over multiple lifetimes. And so this experience, Gerard, is inviting you to step more fully into your strength. The same with your wife. And keep in mind, I'm not saying you're not strong, because that would be an insult. This is inviting you to become stronger than you know yourself to be in this moment, to discover unconditional strength, that balanced with unconditional sensitivity, where it's like, oh, I'm willing to be open and sensitive to anything and everything. Okay, so it looks like I did a pretty good job here with the questions. Thank you all for staying in here to the end here. I have so much love and respect for all of you. I'm really feeling that tonight. I'm going to invite you again to join us Wednesday nights for meditation, which have been incredibly powerful. And Butch, everyone in the Sangha, I'm going to invite you to put Butch on your prayer list, just to send him lots and lots of love. He's having some struggles with his body right now, and he could use some more love. So we invite Butch to be surrounded by angels, and just blessed and held while you're going through this journey, Butch. Much love to you. A big thank you to Danny for all the support you're doing, Danny, with the Facebook page and the social media. And thank you all for offering your donations and your support for the broadcast. May peace be with you all, and have a wonderful evening. Good night. Bye for now.